Staying calm buys you more time than strength ever will. People hear that and nod along. But it only becomes real when you're in a moment where panic feels like the most natural response. Picture the first jolt of fear when you're pushed underwater, or when a situation turns fast and you're sure you're running out of air, options, or control. Your body wants to react. It wants to burn energy, thrash around, grab at anything that feels like a solution. Instinct tells you to move. Calm tells you to wait. And that pause creates space. Most people think time is fixed, that it runs at the same speed for everyone in the same situation. But mental state changes the way you experience it. When you panic, seconds collapse. You breathe harder, your thoughts scatter, and the feeling of urgency grows louder. The whole moment tightens around you until you can't separate what's actually happening from what your mind is inventing. Calm slows that down. It stretches each second so you can make use of it instead of wasting it on noise. Strength alone can't do that. Strength is a burst. It's a resource you burn through. And once it's gone, it's gone. Calm works differently. It's more like a gatekeeper for everything else you have. If you keep your mind steady, you protect your energy. You keep your breathing under control. You make decisions instead of guesses. You see what's in front of you instead of what you fear might be there. Think of someone trapped in a stressful test. The ones who muscle through it tire fast. They spend themselves in the first wave of effort. But the ones who stay grounded can outlast almost anyone. They recognize that the real challenge isn't the physical task. It's the mental rush that tries to push them into a rushed mistake. When you remain calm, you let the environment reveal its rhythm. You notice the small details that help you understand what's going on. You give yourself the privilege of clarity. Calm is also contagious. When you hold it, others around you adjust. People trust someone who isn't carried away by the moment. They watch how you breathe, how you hold your shoulders, how you listen before you act. That steadiness becomes a signal, and it changes the way a group functions under pressure. Strength may impress people, but calm steadies them. Another thing about calm is that it lets you keep your mind flexible. Panic tries to force you into one solution, usually the fastest one, whether it's good or not. Calm gives you room to consider more than one direction. You can shift, adjust, or pull back without feeling like you're losing. You stop seeing the moment as a trap and start treating it like a situation that can be managed piece by piece. Even when the pressure increases, you don't fall into the belief that your only option is to match intensity with intensity. You can choose something smarter. This matters in physical challenges, but it also shows up in everyday conflict. When someone snaps at you, it's easy to fire back. When your schedule falls apart, it's easy to scramble. When bad news hits, it's easy to spiral. Calm keeps you from being dragged by the first wave of emotion. You can separate the hit from your response. You can wait 2 seconds longer than your irritation wants you to. That pause often changes everything. People sometimes confuse calm with passivity, but it isn't that. Calm doesn't mean you avoid action. It means you choose action with a level head instead of letting fear or frustration shove you into something sloppy. Real calm requires strength of a different kind. It asks you to override your instincts, control your breath, and trust that a measured response will carry you further than a frantic one. There's also a physical side to this. When you stay calm, your heart rate settles. Your oxygen lasts longer. Your muscles stay loose instead of locking up. You move with better timing because your brain isn't overloaded. Even in a simple situation, like holding a position or wading through discomfort, calm extends your endurance. The body follows the mind, and when the mind is steady, the body performs with a kind of quiet efficiency that raw strength can't match. People discover this in their own ways. Sometimes it's in a pool. Sometimes it's during a conversation that could turn into an argument. Sometimes it's in a moment where they realize rushing won't save them. Once you feel the power of staying calm in a high-stress moment, it changes the way you approach every challenge after that. You stop seeing pressure as something that demands force. You start seeing it as something that demands presence. Your mind reaches further than your body thinks it can. Most of the limits you feel in a hard moment don't come from muscle, lungs, or stamina. They come from the conversation happening in your head, the one that tells you you're close to the edge long before you actually are. The body sends signals, but the mind interprets them, and that interpretation decides whether you keep going or stop. When you understand this, you start to see that most thresholds are softer than they seem. What feels like a wall is often just a warning. What feels like the end is usually your mind estimating risk, not actual capability. Think about the first sign of strain in any challenge. Maybe it's a tightness in the chest, a shake in your hands, a rush of heat behind your eyes. The body isn't failing. It's alerting. It's saying, pay attention. But the mind can twist that message. It can say you're done, you're spent, you can't keep pushing. And if you believe it, you stop right there. But when you push past that first signal with intention instead of panic, you find something interesting. The body adapts. The breathing finds a pattern. The shaking evens out. A new rhythm takes over, one that feels almost calmer than the moment before. That's the mind showing you its reach. That's the moment where you learn you were never close to empty. People underestimate how much of their physical experience is influenced by psychology. Fear tightens the muscles before fatigue does. Doubt drains energy faster than exertion. Expectation shapes endurance. If you expect a task to be beyond you, your body behaves like it is. If you expect discomfort but believe you can ride it out, the discomfort doesn't take the same hold. The mind builds the frame through which the body operates. Change the frame, and everything inside it shifts. This plays out in training all the time. Someone new to a tough environment will quit early because their mind interprets every surge of discomfort as a threat. Someone with more experience knows the difference between danger and discomfort. Their body may be working just as hard, but their mind doesn't flare up in panic. That single difference lets them tap into reserves the other person never accesses. It's not that they were born with more ability. It's that their mind doesn't shut the door the moment things feel tight. There's a reason instructors push people to their edge. It's not to break them. It's to show them that the edge they fear is usually farther away than they think. When you're underwater, when your lungs start to press for air, the instinct is to believe you have seconds left. But trained calm shifts that experience. Instead of reacting to the first spike of discomfort, you acknowledge it, accept it, and move through it. You realize that your capacity isn't measured by the first urge to stop. It's measured by how well you manage the space that comes after that urge appears. The mind can stretch that space. It can widen it. It can turn a second that feels unbearable into something manageable. This isn't magic. It's focus. When you redirect your thoughts, even slightly, the body follows. Instead of thinking about the need to breathe, you think about counting. Instead of thinking about the burn in your muscles, you think about form. Instead of thinking about how much longer you have to endure, you think about the next small marker in front of you. These tiny shifts don't remove difficulty, but they keep it from overwhelming you. And in that steadiness, you discover strength you didn't know you had. There's also a quiet confidence that grows when you realize your mind can guide your body through hard moments. You stop treating discomfort as a stop sign. You treat it like a signal that you're entering the real part of the challenge. You trust that you can handle more than your instincts claim. That trust builds each time you test it. And over time, it rewrites your sense of what's possible. But the mind's reach isn't only about pushing through pain. It's also about strategy. A calm mind can see a path a stressed mind can't. When you're overwhelmed, you think in straight lines. You try the same approach with more force. But when your mind is steady, it sees options. It notices the small adjustment that reduces effort. It recognizes the timing that saves energy. The body may be working hard, but the mind is working smart, and that combination lets you go farther than brute effort alone. People who develop this skill carry it into everyday life. When a problem hits, they don't fold at the first feeling of strain. They let the initial rush pass. They look at the situation with clearer eyes. They respond from intention instead of reflex. And they discover, again and again, that they can handle more than they assumed. Their body doesn't dictate their limit. Their mind does, and their mind learns to stretch. Once you experience that shift even once, it changes the way you approach challenge. You no longer treat your first reaction as the truth. You learn to pause, to breathe, to test the edges instead of accepting them. And that simple ability, to push a little further than your instincts suggest, becomes one of the most powerful tools you have in any difficult moment. Pressure exposes habits, not wishes. People often talk about who they want to be when things get difficult, but when the moment actually hits, the version that shows up is the one they've practiced, not the one they've imagined. Pressure strips away the extra layers. It removes rehearsed confidence and surface-level optimism. What's left is whatever you've built into your daily behavior. If you've practiced patience, it appears. If you've practiced rushing, that shows instead. If you've learned to breathe before acting, that becomes your anchor. If you've trained yourself to react fast without thinking, that's what takes over. Pressure doesn't invent a new you. It reveals the one you've been training the whole time. You can see this in small moments long before you face anything dramatic. Think about your reaction when someone cuts you off in traffic, or when a deadline shifts, or when you're caught off guard in a conversation. Those tiny spikes of pressure show your default settings. If your habit is to snap, you snap. If your habit is to freeze, you freeze. If your habit is to gather yourself before responding, you do that without effort. It doesn't feel like a choice because it isn't. It's a pattern you've built. People sometimes assume they'll rise to the occasion when something big happens. They picture themselves staying level-headed, performing well, or making good decisions. But the truth is, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your training. And training isn't just the formal stuff. It's every small behavior you repeat in the quiet parts of your life. It's how you treat challenges when no one is watching. It's the way you talk to yourself when something goes wrong. It's the way you prepare, or avoid preparing, for the things you know might be hard. Under pressure, the brain looks for shortcuts. It doesn't want to experiment. It wants to go with what feels familiar. That's why habits matter so much. A calm mindset becomes muscle memory. Rushed decisions become muscle memory too. And the moment stress spikes, your mind grabs the one that's been rehearsed the most. Even physical reactions follow this pattern. If you've practiced holding your breath in a controlled way, your body settles into it naturally. If you've never trained your breathing, it jumps straight into panic mode. Pressure reveals these differences immediately. This is one reason training environments are built to create discomfort. Instructors want to see what you do when you're cold, tired, confused, or pushed harder than you expected. Not to punish you, but to show you the habits you might not know you have. Maybe you shut down when you feel overwhelmed. Maybe you argue. Maybe you speed up to try to outrun the stress. Maybe you get quiet and think clearly. Whatever the pattern is, pressure brings it to the surface. The good news is that habits can be replaced. When you start paying attention to how you respond in small moments of pressure, you can train yourself toward better patterns. If you notice that you rush, you practice slowing down your first reaction. If you notice you panic early, you work on breathing through that first surge. If you notice you avoid hard decisions, you start taking a step instead of backing off. These aren't dramatic changes. They're small rewrites, done again and again, until the mind accepts them as normal. Over time, these small habits build a different default mode. And when real pressure hits, that's the version that shows up. Not the idealized version you hope will appear someday, but the one you've prepared. People with strong habits don't look effortless in hard situations because they're naturally gifted. They look that way because they've practiced being steady, even in circumstances that didn't require it. They learned early that consistency is stronger than intention. There's another layer to this. Pressure doesn't just expose your habits of action. It exposes your habits of thought. If you regularly tell yourself you can't handle certain things, that script plays automatically when stress rises. If you practice believing you can adjust, adapt, or figure something out, that script plays instead. The inner voice becomes a habit too. And in the moments when everything feels tight, that voice is louder than usual. It can steady you or sabotage you, depending on what you've taught it to say. People often imagine pressure will make them more focused, more heroic, or more disciplined. But pressure actually makes you more honest. It takes away the parts you perform and leaves only the parts you've built. That honesty can be uncomfortable, but it's also useful. It shows you exactly what needs work. It shows you what you can rely on and what you can't yet trust. It shows you the gap between who you think you are and who you really are when things turn sharp. The strength you show under pressure doesn't come from the moment itself. It comes from the habits that moment pulls to the surface. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you can start shaping those habits on purpose. Controlled breathing is controlled thinking. At first, that sounds like a simple idea you might hear in a fitness class, but in a real pressure situation, it becomes the difference between clarity and collapse. The mind and breath are tied together more tightly than most people realize. When your breathing shifts, your thoughts shift. When your breath speeds up, your mind races with it. When your breath is slow and steady, your thoughts settle into that same rhythm. You can feel this anywhere, before a difficult conversation, during a workout that hits harder than expected, or in the sudden silence right after something goes wrong. The body reacts first. The mind follows unless you step in and direct the response. Most people think panic starts in the head, but it often starts in the lungs. The moment your breath shortens, your brain interprets it as danger. It doesn't ask why. It doesn't check if the situation actually requires that level of alarm. It just flips the switch. Heart rate climbs. Muscles tighten. Thoughts scatter. That's why people say they can't think straight when stressed. Their breathing pattern is telling the brain something is wrong, even if the moment is manageable. If you don't take control of your breath, the rest of your internal reactions run wild. Controlled breathing interrupts that spiral. It doesn't fix the situation around you, but it changes the lens through which your mind sees it. When you take a slow, full breath, the body reads it as a signal that you're not in immediate danger. Even if the moment is tough, that signal buys you space. Your thoughts stop sprinting. Your vision widens. You can take in the situation without feeling hunted by it. One steady breath often gives you more clarity than a minute of frantic thinking. This is especially true in physical challenges. When people get pushed underwater or put into intense conditioning drills, their first instinct is to gasp or hold their breath in a tight, panicked way. That reaction burns oxygen fast. It also sends the mind into alarm mode, which makes everything feel 10 times harder. The people who stay composed don't stay composed because their bodies magically handle the stress better. They stay composed because their breathing stays under their control. It's deliberate, even when the environment is anything but calm. There's a reason instructors focus so much on breathing during training. They know that if you can control your breath, you can control your decisions. If you let your breath run wild, you lose the ability to think clearly. A steady rhythm under tight conditions means you're still in charge of your reactions. Even when the body is straining, the mind stays organized. You're able to notice details you'd miss if you were panicking. You're able to pace yourself instead of burning out in the first wave. You're able to respond rather than react. Breathing also acts as a bridge between instinct and conscious thought. Instinct wants to pull you towards speed, tension, and immediate action. Conscious thought wants you to slow down, assess, and choose. When stress hits, instinct usually wins unless you anchor yourself with breath. That anchor shifts control back to you. It lets you decide whether to move, wait, or change direction. Without it, you're dragged by whatever emotion hits first. The influence breath has on emotion is easy to see in everyday moments. If you've ever felt overwhelmed at your desk, or frustrated in a conversation, or thrown off by unexpected news, you've probably noticed your breath tightening before anything else. That tightness makes the moment feel bigger than it is. But when you pause and take a slow breath, the moment shrinks into something you can handle. The problem doesn't disappear, but the fog around it does. People who practice this regularly don't stay calm because they're naturally serene. They stay calm because they know how to reset themselves through their breath. Controlled breathing also helps manage physical discomfort. When you breathe steadily, your muscles stay loose instead of locking up. Your joints move smoother. Your body uses oxygen more efficiently. Endurance goes up because tension goes down. Even a hard workout feels different when your breath leads instead of your fear. The mind notices this and becomes more confident in what the body can do. That confidence carries into the next challenge and the next, building a loop where calm reinforces performance and performance reinforces calm. There's another part to this. Controlled breathing builds familiarity with discomfort. When you practice staying steady during stress, your mind learns that the feeling of strain isn't a threat. It's just a signal. And once your mind accepts that, it stops panicking at the first sign of pressure. You can stand in the discomfort longer without rushing to escape it. This doesn't mean you ignore danger. It means you know the difference between real danger and the early whispers of discomfort that used to throw you off balance. People often look for complicated strategies to stay calm under pressure, but the simplest one is also the most effective. Breathe in a way that keeps your mind steady. You can do it standing, sitting, moving, or submerged in water. You can do it in silence or in chaos. When you take charge of your breath, you take charge of the moment, because your breath shapes the thoughts that guide every action that follows. Composure is a skill you earn, not a trait you're born with. People like to imagine calm individuals as naturally unshakable, as if they arrived in the world with some built-in stillness. But real composure is learned the same way strength is learned, by being tested, by failing, by trying again, and by slowly building tolerance for discomfort. No one is naturally calm the first time pressure hits. The heart races. The breath shortens. The mind jumps to the worst outcome. Composure grows only when you face those reactions and train yourself not to be pulled around by them. In small moments, you can see how this works. Think of the first time you had to speak up in a room full of people. Your voice probably shook. Your thoughts scattered. Your body reacted in ways you didn't expect. But the second time felt a little easier, not because you became a different person, but because you'd already survived the rush once before. Your body recognized the feeling. Your mind trusted that you could handle it. That's how composure develops. It's built through repetition and exposure, not through theory or wishful thinking. People who look naturally calm often have long histories of being in tough situations. They've been embarrassed, stressed, overwhelmed, or pushed to their edge enough times that the feeling no longer scares them. They recognize that discomfort isn't an emergency. They understand that the surge of adrenaline is temporary. They've learned that most situations give you more room than you initially think. Their calm isn't gifted. It's earned through experience, sometimes quiet, sometimes rough, sometimes humbling. Composure also comes from knowing yourself. You learn what triggers your panic, your frustration, your tendency to rush, or your urge to withdraw. When you know your patterns, you can manage them instead of being blindsided by them. This makes a huge difference under pressure. Someone who understands their own reactions can ground themselves early, adjust their breathing, and focus their attention before stress drags them into a spiral. Someone who never paid attention to their habits gets overwhelmed fast. Self-awareness sounds simple, but it's one of the foundations of composure. Another part of earned composure is preparation. Not dramatic preparation, but the quiet kind done long before anyone is watching. When you train a skill, when you practice a scenario, when you rehearse your steps in advance, you reduce the mental load in the moment. Your mind doesn't have to scramble for answers because you've already built some structure into the situation. This doesn't remove uncertainty, but it gives you a stable starting point. Even a few familiar steps can steady you when everything else feels chaotic. Composure is also shaped by how you interpret difficulty. Some people treat stress as a sign they're failing. They feel the pressure rise and assume it means they aren't ready. Others see stress as a normal part of challenge. They don't take the discomfort personally. They treat it like weather, something to move through, not something that defines them. That shift in mindset gives them more room to stay level. When you stop believing that discomfort means danger, your reactions become calmer by default. The small behaviors you practice every day matter more than the big moments. If you rush through minor frustrations, you'll rush through major ones. If you practice staying patient with small delays, small mistakes, or small irritations, you build the same skill you'll need under real pressure. Composure isn't built during the crisis. It's built in the 1,000 small choices you make before the crisis ever arrives. That's why people with a steady presence tend to have steady habits. The moment doesn't create their calm. It reveals what they've practiced. There's also a physical side to earning composure. The more you expose your body to controlled stress, cold, heat, long workouts, difficult drills, the less reactive it becomes. Your nervous system learns to stay steady even when your heart rate rises. Your breathing stays smoother. Your muscles don't lock up as fast. That physical adaptation supports the mental side. When your body stays manageable, your mind has a clearer foundation to work from. Composure grows each time you realize you can handle more than you expected. Maybe you stay calm in a conversation that once would have made you defensive. Maybe you keep your breathing steady during an intense physical challenge. Maybe you solve a problem even though your first instinct was to panic. These small wins build confidence, and that confidence becomes part of your internal structure. You start to trust yourself in difficult moments. You stop fearing your own reactions. You know you can move through the surge of tension and still think clearly. People sometimes wait for composure to appear before they face hard things. But it works the other way around. Courage comes first. You act even while nervous. You show up even while unsure. You breathe through the discomfort instead of running from it. Over time, that repetition builds the skill you thought you were missing. The calm you want is on the other side of practice, not the other way around. Composure isn't perfection. It's the ability to stay present when things feel uncertain. It's something you build piece by piece, by being willing to enter the uncomfortable moments instead of avoiding them, and by learning from each one until steady becomes your new normal. What feels like the breaking point is usually the starting line. Most people assume the moment they feel overwhelmed is the moment they should back off, slow down, or stop. They treat that first spike of discomfort as proof that they've reached their limit. But in difficult training, in serious challenges, and even in ordinary life, that first wave isn't the end. It's the door into the real work. The body sends signals long before it's empty. The mind reacts to those signals as if they're warnings of collapse, even when there's plenty of capacity left. When you learn to recognize that difference, the whole idea of a breaking point shifts. The earliest signs of strain feel loud. Your breathing changes. Your muscles tighten. Your mind tells you to retreat. Everything in you wants to escape the moment. But most of that intensity comes from anticipation, not reality. The body doesn't know what's coming next, so it sends alerts at the first hint of stress. The mind, always trying to protect you, interprets it as danger. But if you stay in the moment a little longer, not recklessly, but with awareness, you discover the signal softens. You settle into the effort. Your breathing evens out. Your thoughts stop rushing. It's strange how often the hardest part of a challenge is the first few seconds where your instincts scream louder than your actual limits. This shows up in physical training all the time. Someone doing a long swim feels the urge to stop early, not because they're out of air, but because the discomfort feels unfamiliar. Someone running experiences a wave of heaviness around the first mile, but if they push through it, they hit a rhythm that carries them farther than they expected. Your body has layers of endurance, and you don't access them until you get past that first internal alarm. It's not the breaking point. It's an entry point into a deeper level of capability. The same thing happens emotionally. The moment a conversation gets tense, the moment you receive unexpected criticism, the moment a plan falls apart, you feel the surge. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts speed up. You feel unprepared. That emotional spike tricks you into thinking the situation is worse than it is. But if you stay with it, if you breathe, wait, and let the intensity settle, you often find clarity on the other side. The situation didn't change. You just reached the point where real problem solving begins. Pressure doesn't create the breaking point. Interpretation does. When people label discomfort as a stop sign, they never see what comes after it. They never reach the part of themselves that can handle more. They never see their own resilience in action. But if you treat the first sign of strain as a checkpoint instead of a limit, you start to understand how much range you actually have. You learn you can think clearly while uncomfortable. You learn your breath can steady even when your heart is pounding. You learn your body can keep working even when it feels heavy. These discoveries don't happen before discomfort. They happen inside it. There's also a mental shift that happens when you experience this enough times. You stop fearing the first wave. You stop reading it as failure. You know it's coming, and you expect it, so it doesn't shock you the same way. This alone changes how you show up in challenges. Instead of panicking when things tighten, you recognize it as part of the process. You let the feeling move through you. You stay present. And because you're not fighting the discomfort, You have more energy to deal with the actual problem. This idea shows up clearly in specialized training environments. Instructors push people to the place where they think they're done, not out of cruelty, but to show them they aren't anywhere close to done. They want people to feel that moment where everything inside says stop, while everything outside shows they're still performing. Once someone experiences that, the idea of a breaking point becomes less intimidating. They've stood on that line and realized it wasn't the edge at all. It was the threshold to a different version of themselves. In everyday life, the same pattern holds. The breaking point in a job, a relationship, or a personal challenge often looks like the moment things feel too heavy to carry. But sometimes that weight pushes you into decisions you've been avoiding. Sometimes it forces you to grow skills you didn't know you needed. Sometimes it exposes a strength you hadn't used before. Nothing changes until you hit a point where staying the same is harder than moving forward. The breaking point becomes the beginning of something better because it strips away the illusion that comfort equals stability. Your real capacity doesn't show up when everything is smooth. It shows up the moment things become uncomfortable enough that you think you've reached an end. If you step back every time you hit that feeling, you'll always operate far below what you can actually do. But if you stay steady, even for a few seconds more, you open the door to a level of endurance, clarity, and strength that most people never access simply because they turned around too early. The breaking point isn't where you stop. It's where you start seeing what you're actually capable of, the version of yourself that only appears when you're willing to keep going past the first loud signal telling you to quit.